Aloha! This CME activity is jointly provided by the Queens Medical Center and UH-JABSOM Department of Geriatric Medicine. Just a reminder, please complete the evaluation forms for attendance. These are required to receive CME credit. Enter the name and credentials of everyone viewing this geriatric echo. You can find the evaluations by following the link in the chat or at any time on our website or email advertisement. We offer free continuing education for this series after you have completed your evaluations. Certificates are emailed the Monday after our educational series. Your comments are very important to the planning committee and will be used to plan future programs. About ECHO, we want to remind everyone that this is an ECHO webinar, which means that this session serves as a forum for mutual teaching and learning from experts and from each of us on the front lines. As the ECHO model goes, all teach, all learn. So it will take all of you to create this community of learning. A little bit about our format. After a short lecture from our experts, we will share expertise from the rest of the team and then open up the time for case discussions. We invite you to share any geriatric cases. It may even be on a topic not related to today's lecture. We only ask that you keep the case for discussion HIPAA compliant. That means please do not share patient's name, birthday, address, and so on. We learn best from our patients. They are the best teachers. Our interdisciplinary team is here as well, and we're all willing to teach and share our collective wisdom with you. Most of you already know me. I'm Wynette Gaylord, president of ARCA, Alliance of Residential Care Home Administrators. Maribel Tan, president of Adult Foster Family Home Association. Juliana Caldwell from Aloha Care, Leila Ventar from United Healthcare, Dr. Aida Wen, and Dr. Ritabel Fernandez from University of Hawaii. In this month, we will talking about, it gives me now great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Colette V. Browne is Professor Emerita, Thompson School of Social Work and Public Health at the University of Hawaii. She is a gubernatorial appointee to the state's Policy Advisory Board for Elderly Affairs. She has written extensively in primary referee journals on aging and health, diversity issues, and social policy. Dr. Browne, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And I'd like to, again, welcome all of you here. I'd also like to thank John for helping with the PowerPoint slide. So thank you, John. Again, as this topic is, as was just discussed, this is Caring for the Caregiver, a journey to caregiver wellness. And again, I'm Colette Browne, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. Could we have the next slide, John? Rosalind Carter, the wife of former President Jimmy Carter, recently died, and she was very well known for being an advocate for caregivers, whether paid or unpaid. She said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, who are currently caregivers, who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And she's absolutely right when you think about it. This is something that all of us have faced, will face, and are facing today. Could we have the next slide, please? I really wanted to start really sincerely as thanking you for your work that you do every day. You know, caregivers, we talk about that word a lot, but up until about 25 years ago, we never really used that term. We talked about families. I remember doing a study with spouses who were caring for their own husbands or wives and talking about caregiving. And one gentleman said to me, "I'm not a caregiver, I'm a husband." So it's a term that is fairly new when you think about it. So when we say caregivers, who are we talking about? We're really talking about someone who's helping another person in need. It might be an ill spouse or a partner, a child with a disability, an aging friend, a neighbor, a relative, or someone that you're paid to care for. You can be a family member, you can be a paid, you can be an unpaid caregiver. And of course, there are varied professions in the fields of study that really focus on this issue related to caregiving. We could have the next slide, John. There are really a number of different professions, and I found this to be so true in my own work. And I was always so grateful, as I'm sure you are, for all the different specialties now, all the different people that can work with us when we want to provide the best care we can to frail elders. So in addition to social work and public health, which are more my areas, we know nursing, of course, physicians and geriatrics, physical therapy, occupational therapy, recreational therapy, speech therapy, group and care home operators, adult daycare operators. The list really just goes on and on about all the different people who are so engaged in this very growing field that we call gerontology and geriatrics. We could have the next one. Well, something that all of you know, of course, so well is that there are different skill sets. And I found that in working with all of the different professions and all of the different fields of study that we talked about in the previous slide, it seemed that people, regardless of their field, have to know 4 basic things. And we'll talk about those today. The knowledge on the aging process and common aging-related changes, knowledge on service options from well to frail, effective communication, assessment, and advocacy, and of course, respect for and knowledge of diverse populations. The next slide, please. And again, as all of you know so well, care is provided, well, in all different settings. It's in adult daycares, it's in adult protective services, assisted living, nursing homes, foster care homes, small and larger group care homes, healthcare settings, private homes. There are so many different places where care is provided, especially to those who increasingly need care and are more vulnerable. Next slide. So why is this growing focus on caregivers? Well, we have a growing aging population. We know this is global. It's not just in Hawaii, but it's a global phenomenon. We know that this is linked to, of course, longevity. And in the United States, the average life expectancy is about 77 now. And here in Hawaii, it's 80. In fact, we live the longest of all 50 states, although not everyone lives equally as long. We know that as well. I'm curious if all of you know, since we live the longest in Hawaii, which racial ethnic group lives the longest in Hawaii? Does anybody want to take a guess? I actually wish we were in a room together so we could chat more, but I know Zooms are the way that we're doing trainings now.
Chinese, maybe?
Yeah, who said that?
Lynette?
One neck, good for you. Yes, those with Chinese ancestry live the longest. Anybody want to guess the second?
Filipinos?
Well, Filipinos third, so that was a good choice. So it's Chinese, then it's Japanese, then it's Filipino, then Caucasian, and then Native Hawaiian. And then from there, but those are the 5 major ethnic groups in Hawaii. And again, there's lots of reasons why there's different life expectancies, which is more than we can talk about today. But that in itself is a fascinating topic that I'm sure another session will focus on. But why we focus on caregivers again, so we live the longest here in Hawaii, we also see an increased age of older adults. And as you know, someone 60 is very different from someone who's 90. Although if you're 15 years old, you probably lump those two together. My grandson just the other day said to me, "Oh, Tutu, I hope you're alive when I'm in high school." I thought, oh gosh, I hope I am too. But we live much longer. Again, our average age here in Hawaii now, we're looking more in the 80s. And our fastest growing age group, of course, are those 85 and over. And of course, what does that mean? That really speaks to the impact of increased vulnerability and frailty Your chance of needing more care increases the older you are. We have an increased need there for paid and unpaid caregivers, in part because family sizes are becoming smaller. There are more people, in fact, those who are in their 50s and 60s have one of the higher rates of people who did not have children. So they don't have any family caregivers unless it's an extended family of aunties and uncles and cousins and so forth. So there's that increased need for paid caregivers. And of course, then that results in the increased demands on caregivers. For those of you who are operating care homes, you know there's an increased demand, and that demand is only going to grow and get larger. The next slide, please. We're going to do three things today. We're going to understand the importance of wellness for both the caregiver, but the care recipient too. We're going to look at 5 common challenges faced by caregivers, and then we'll suggest or recommend some tips and tools to address challenges and journey toward caregiver wellness. So those will be the 3 things that we'll try to focus on today. Next slide, please. Now, as a caregiver for older adults, probably one of the main things you focus on is really trying to assist older people maintain or improve their quality of life. You've chosen this field because of your commitment to working with older adults, and you want them to have the best sort of life they can given the situation they're in. You also provide what we call a multidimensional understanding of aging and human behavior. And that's just a way of saying you look at the whole person. You don't just look at someone's physical side or someone's emotional side. You look at every aspects of them. When I used to teach at the School of Social Work, and I would ask students, can you describe an older person? You can imagine that the first thing they would say would be they would talk about the physical aspects. Oh, someone with gray hair, someone who needs glasses, someone maybe who needs a walker. And we would then talk to them about, well, that's the essence. If you look at adolescents, young people, you could, yes, talk about the physical aspect, but you would also talk about what teenagers are going through educationally, psychologically, emotionally. And it's the same thing for older adults. So that's what we mean by a holistic perspective, that we understand that it's not just that physical aspect. Yes, maybe they need a walker, maybe they're diabetic and they need insulin, but we know they have emotional and other needs as well. And then we emphasize the social context in which health and long-term care, that social context is so important. So it's why hospitals, as much as they may try, really can't provide that home-like kind of environment that provides more social attention, that tries to deal with issues around loneliness, because again, hospitals are providing something different. In the long-term care setting, care homes, adult daycare programs, other settings, really acknowledge how important that social side is. If we could have the next slide, please. Now, it would be so remiss, I think, of our talk today if we only talked about the difficulties of caregiving, because we know there are joys too. And it's really why many of you probably keep doing this very complex and difficult job that you do, because there are joys in it. There are 1 in 3 adults in the US today who are an informal or family caregiver, 1 out of 3. And there's another 4.6 million who are paid caregivers. So almost 5 million. And those are those who are counted. Think about all those who provide care that are not even counted. That number is probably double. You're looking at personal care and support workers, home health workers, nursing assistants, and again, those who provide alternative living situations for those who are frail. So yes, caregivers have joys and challenges, but we also know that their caregivers have higher levels of stress than non-caregivers. And we know that this is true with research that's been going on for years. Caregivers need help and support because of, again, the stress. Now, this sector, this long-term care sector, it's had a actually decades-long struggle in trying to fill these important positions of paid caregivers. And there's lots of reasons why we have not been able to do that and to stabilize this workforce. And while there are new opportunities that perhaps suggest we are looking at some new opportunities and directions, the truth is, without a solid funding mechanism that allows paid caregivers to make a decent wage, I think we will continue to have these kinds of challenges. Next slide, please. So what we'll talk about today are 5 very common caregiver challenges. And as I said earlier, I'll try to suggest some or recommend some tips and tools that can help you with each one. Now, I wanted to say this though, that I've separated them for ease of our talk today, because we don't have that much time. But in actuality, these are really all interrelated, aren't they? I mean, if you're worried about money, then that impacts your emotional well-being. All of these are really related to one another. But again, for the sake of our brief time today, I'll talk about each one and suggest some tools. If we could start with this first one, then the next slide. I call this one the complexities of caregiving, just because the need for knowledge, it's so great, isn't it, when you step and really think about it. So yes, there are common health and other changes and developments with age, but we know that everyone ages differently. We have neighbors who, the husband is 87, he looks like he could move a mountain, and his wife is about the same age, and she's very, very frail. So we know that there's great variation. We also know there's great diversity of older adults in terms of not just gender and sexual orientation, but race and ethnicity, social class. So not everyone is exactly the same. Although again, when I used to work with younger students, sometimes they would think that way. And then of course there are cohort or generational changes, how people change differently. When I first started in this field in my early 20s, senior centers were very, very popular. But if you look at those 60 and 70 now, it's a really different cohort, isn't it? Although in a way, I think it's a shame, because senior centers offer some really terrific programs. Next slide, please. So if you think about just one example that I know, and I'll call her Mrs. E. She's a 57-year-old small care home operator. She's been doing it for 12 years. She lives with her husband. She has 4 children. She herself has some health issues. She's diabetic. She has high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And when I talk with her, what she says is, this is a 24/7 job. Even when others help, I worry. She says it's sad. She said, I see dementia, Parkinson's disease, stroke. I see it all, and the work is hard. Can you all relate to that kind of feeling and statement? Yeah. Next slide, please. So for all caregivers, really, there's so much to know, about chronic health issues, Alzheimer's disease, service options, family issues, health issues, payment options, legal caveats and options. There's so many skills needed, behavioral needs and problems, assessment, communication, case management, interventions for the family, uh, long-term care options, end-of-life planning, and of course, for care home operators, let's not forget you're running a business. I mean, there are so many things that you have to consider and think about. I think it's kind of mind-boggling. Next slide, please. So yes, caregiving has its joys and it's rewarding, but there's a lot going on. So what can we recommend? Well, ask for help. Sometimes we think maybe we should know it all ourselves. But one of the things that I learned very early on in my career is it was impossible for me to know everything. Medicaid alone used to make me scratch my head in frustration. So I started to get to know people who I could ask for help when things just got too much for me. So whether it's a geriatrician, a gerontological social worker, a geriatric nurse, other care home operators that are your resources as well, who've had similar experiences, they can all help provide support and services when you're working with frail older adults and their families too. And of course, centers and associations. And something that I do think is pretty fabulous are online resources. You can find so much information, right, about all different kinds of things, and sometimes we just need reminders. You might think, well, I know how to work with somebody who's vision impaired or hearing impairment, has a hearing impairment, but it's good to just be reminded sometimes of kind of hints and tools and that type of thing. So I'm always online because I forget things, and it's good to be reminded. If I could have the next one. So our first one we talked about was, again, the complexity. So now we're on number 2, and that's the stress and caregiving. So yes, as we said, many rewards, but lots of demands, and the demands can lead to stress. It's that 24/7 nature of care that Mrs. E talked about, the increasing needs of elders, feeling alone or isolated in your work, maybe too little guidance from healthcare professionals, maybe having no choice about being a caregiver, maybe needing help to cope and solve with caregiving problems. Now, no one can do all of this alone at all the time. And there's a relationship of stress to all of these issues. There's something, you probably remember this from school, something called that fight or flight. Do you remember that? It was the sympathetic nerve system. It's that network of nerves that help us get energized when something scary happens. So you're in the water and you see a shark fin. So oh my gosh, do I punch it in the nose the way I read I should, or should I take off and try to run? So that fight or flight, and that's our sympathetic nerve system, which is always in operation on some level. But when we're stressed, that it's activated. So the other day, a police car blew light in back of me. My hands started sweating just like that. It's automatic, right? In fact, we call that our automatic nervous system. It's automatic. It wasn't me, by the way. It was somebody they were chasing. That automatic nerve system, our sympathetic nerve system, which is part of our autonomic nerve system, what happens is it's good that it's always activated at a homeostasis level. But when it's activated too much, it impacts our health. And that's the problem with it. Our response should be short-lived, like seeing that blue light behind me. As soon as I realized that blue light was not about me, I relaxed. Again, I wasn't thinking about it. It happened automatically. You want this to be short-lived, but caregiving can be 24/7. And that's when it becomes, as I said, it becomes a problem. It can negatively impact our physical health, our mental well-being. We know it impacts things like our glucose levels. So yes, we want to be able to take care of our stress and our caregiving. Next slide, please. Sometimes we know when we're stressed, and other times we almost need somebody else to say, oh, what's going on with you? And when you stop and think about it, you think, maybe I am burned out. Maybe I'm feeling spiritually distressed or isolated. Maybe I need to improve my physical health. And overall, if I can think about those things, I realize maybe I'm off balance and I need to rebalance my work and my family. And the question is then, how do we do that? Most of us know that stress isn't something that we should be experiencing at a high level every day, but how do we get a handle of it? We could have the next slide, please. One of the first things we do, of course, is to recognize it. So if we're feeling anxious, depressed, maybe it comes out in anger, fatigue, maybe we're irritable, crying, maybe we're losing our temper. There's lots of things that stress can actually look like. So again, if you're not aware of it yourself, sometimes it helps for someone you trust to help you see what's going on in your life. We can have the next slide. So to manage stress, the first thing, of course, before even number 1, is to understand you're under it. And that's the problem with stress, isn't it? That if you're experiencing stress 24/7, on some level, you almost get used to operating at that high level. So again, if you can stop and think for a second, if somebody can help you see that maybe what you're not seeing yourself, yes, you're under stress, ask for help and accept help from the people out there, people in your lives. Focus on what you can do. At times, you might feel you're not doing enough. I think we all feel that way. But believe that you're doing the best that you can at that time. Set goals for yourself. Sometimes I know you can take a large task and break it into smaller pieces. And if I can feel I'm making some progress in one of the smaller pieces, that can really help me feel that I'm moving in the right direction. And then, of course, get connected, learn about caregiving resources we talked about online, but obviously there's programs like the ECHO program and many others as well. And for care home operators, you have wonderful resources with your associations and people who can really guide you and really help you with so many issues. Next one, please. Now, I put this one in because I'll tell you why. Stop and smell the flowers. When I was in the midst of my career and I had a husband and children and taking care of elderly parents, and if somebody told me to stop and smell the flowers, I would have, well, I wouldn't have been too happy with that kind of advice. But the truth of the matter is, it's really what we call mindfulness now, isn't it? It really is important that we stop and smell the flowers. In fact, if we could have the next slide. Over the past 20 years, the National Institute on Health and other research bodies have been studying the effects of stress and relaxation techniques on impacting stress on well-being. And honestly, the results are, I think they're pretty astonishing. They're finding that relaxation and mindfulness can impact things like decreasing our blood pressure, decreasing our stress, and maybe even impacting our heart health and other body functions. So things that we used to think maybe were nice, but maybe not so scientific, they're actually quite scientific now. When we talk about relaxation, things like yoga or Tai Chi or meditation, or even breathing exercises. So again, these things are really amazing. You can download a smart app with guided meditations or relaxation music, and most of these apps are free. So they're really terrific to when you're feeling that stressed. If we could have the next one. In fact, I wanted us to spend the next 2 or 3 minutes trying one together. And I hope that you won't think, I don't have the time for this, because then that tells me you absolutely need the time for this if you think you don't have the time for this. So this will just take 2 or 3 minutes. It says 5 minutes, but I promise it will just take 2 or 3 minutes. So I'd like to ask you, make sure you're in a comfortable chair. So can you all kind of just make sure you're kind of comfortable and you're kind of, you're back, you're really comfortable in your chair. You're kind of sitting in there. And what I'm going to be asking you to do, and I'll take you through this, we're going to very simply just practice breathing in through our nose. I'm going to count to 4, and then I'm going to ask you to hold it for 2 seconds, and then we'll be breathing it out. And we're going to do this about 3 times. Again, I'm going to take you through it. You'll be breathing in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll hold it, hold your breath, and then you'll slowly 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale. Okay. And then we'll do this 3 times. Okay. I'm going to take you through it the first time, and then the next 2 times, do it yourself at your own pace, because you know your own body and you know your own pace. So are we ready to start? Okay, so I'll take you through the first time. So let's breathe in and out through our nose. Big breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold it. And now slowly exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do it 2 more times. Breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. Now slowly exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time, I'll let you do it yourself. Okay, is everyone finished? That's a very simple relaxation technique that actually has been found to lower our stress levels and lower our blood pressure. So I'll ask that you think about that and other relaxation techniques when you're feeling stressed. It doesn't cost anything. It will just take you a few minutes to do, and it can be really useful. Next slide. So again, we're on number 3. We looked at the complexity of health. We looked at stress, and now we're looking at caregiving and an impact on our physical health. Now, what research finds is that our quality of life is impacted by caregiving because of things like perhaps sleep difficulty, maybe you're just tired all the time, caregiving related injuries, which I think sometimes don't get enough attention, lifting people, helping people move. All of this is hard on your own body, isn't it? So we don't really, I think, spend enough attention on that. And then the pain that can be related to all of the things that we're just talking about. So there are a real impact on our health. Next slide. So what can we do? Don't neglect your own health. And it's not just because you're a caregiver to someone who needs care. You deserve to have good health, your own self. So get regular physical activity, exercise, even in small amounts. It can boost your energy level. It can reduce your stress, help you maintain a healthy weight, maintain blood pressure and cholesterol at healthy levels. Even just going for a walk. If somebody, oh, that's when you need help because someone needs to come and relieve you, right? But if you can even just go for a walk, that can be so beneficial. Maintaining a heart healthy diet. 30, 40 years ago, if you talk to physicians of that generation, they would say very often, oh, we never study nutrition. Diet isn't that important. And of course, think of how that's changed, how much we realize diet and nutrition are essential. So again, making sure they eat as well as you can, that can give you that kind of energy. Next slide, please. Keep your own medical and dental appointments. Yes, of course, you try to make sure that all of the care recipients that you have responsibility for, I know you do that, but I want you to keep your own medical and dental appointments. I want you to maintain your health. Ask for help when you need it. Get away when you need to. Take care of your own health and well-being. Again, you deserve them. Talk to a physical therapist. Remember, we talked about the fact that you might be pushing your own body too much. I have found physical therapists to be just such a wealth of information about the proper way to use your body, things that I'd never thought about before. So if you know a physical therapist, or you can even see things on YouTube, if it's hard to talk to one, and you can find out so much about the right ways to move and so forth. So I have tremendous respect for physical therapists. Next slide. Well, what else? Well, what about trouble sleeping? Good sleep. Gosh, I've been reading that sleep problems are epidemic. And I'm really not surprised, are you? I mean, the news itself, right before this session started, a few of us started talking about that how challenging these times are. There seems to be so much to worry about, whether it's climate crises and change, or just the political news, or the financial situation in the world and locally. And the list goes on and on. It just seems like there's so much to worry about and be concerned about. So I'm not surprised that a lot of us have trouble sleeping. But good sleep is so important for our health. It's a little bit like how we used to feel about diet, that, oh, you could eat whatever you wanted, but now we know that's not true. And same thing with sleep. We used to feel, well, I'll catch up if I'm not sleeping that well. No, sleeping well is really important. So talk to your healthcare professional if you're not sleeping well, if you're sleeping for a few hours and getting up, if you're not getting that REM kind of sleep, that's so critical. Talk to your doctor and talk to them about, I'm really having trouble sleeping. It's really not good for you. And also get the vaccines that you need and regular health screenings. Share your work stresses, your worries or symptoms you have with your physician. If you have someone else that you talk to, please share that with someone as well. again, your well-being is really paramount to what this session is all about today. Next slide. Okay, so we're now on number 4. Again, we looked at the complexities, the challenges of caregiving. We looked at stress. We looked at physical health. Now we're looking at caregivers and emotional well-being. Now, everyone deserves to be healthy, happy with their lives, have some financial security, have close relationships with family and friends. We all should have that, but not all of us do. And certainly if you are a caregiver to a frail elder, all of these, or maybe some of these can be challenged. The next one, please. But remember that you deserve to be happy. Now, earlier, we talked about the sympathetic nerve system that activates that fight or flight. You know, you see the shark, you don't know what to do. It's a natural stress response, and it allows you to move away from danger. So again, it's a good thing, but the problem is when it's activated 24/7, when you're constantly working, as we said, at that level. That long-term activation is not good. It impacts levels like obesity, heart disease, cancer. We just practice the relaxation technique, and that's actually part of our parasympathetic nerve system. This is when our body tells us, slow down, smell the flowers, relax. Rather than fight or flight, it's digest and rest. So it's kind of rest. Your body slows down, and we need to do that. One of the ways that we do it, of course, is to get social support. And talk to a friend, how important that is to just chat with a friend or talk to a person online. See friends, that's even better if you can carve out some time to even just have coffee with a friend. Keep humor in your life. There have been more studies now on how important laughter is and how laughter can actually decrease your stress. Years ago, there was a very study that everyone talked about. I think his name was Dr. Norman Cousins, who was a physician who'd been told he had a life-altering disease, and he decided that he was going to laugh himself to good health. So he rented all these movies, of course now it would be streaming, and he would stream all these like old funny movies that I know my dad used to like. Look, Laurel and Hardy, you know, kind of like slapstick, almost kind of comedies. And he played them for hours every day, and all he did was laugh and laugh and laugh. And what he found was that his body chemistry actually changed, and that it was such a positive thing, and his health actually improved. So it was a well-known study, and everybody talked about it. But there really is something about laughter and how you feel after you've had just a really good laugh. Next one. So once a week, so what do we say? Please, for yourself, do something fun. You know, visit a local coffee shop, attend religious events, take a class, visit a friend, ask for help. If we have a wonderful group of people today, and again, I'm always sorry in a way, grateful that we have Zoom, but sorry that we can't be in a room together, because I think if we could, it would be so much fun to hear about what each of us do to help relax. You know, I know I have a friend who says she goes from Nordstrom to Macy's and back. She walks twice a day and she goes back and forth, and she goes, so I said to her, wow, there's so many people. And she said, oh no, somehow it relaxes her. She looks at pretty things in the windows, and that relaxes her. I like to look at home magazines. I don't know why. I look at these magazines and I look at houses that I'll never live in my life because they're so fancy, but it just is kind of fun to look at these pretty pictures. And I'm sure each of you have things that you do, right, that bring you some happiness and joy. So whatever those are, do them. Make sure you take the time. Maybe it's a glass of wine. Maybe it's whatever it is. Do whatever you know works, and do it constantly and continuously, because that brings you joy, and you know what that is. So by the way, at the end of this session, I have my email, so I'd love to hear from you. So shoot me a line and let me know what you do that really is good for you and your well-being. Can we have the next one? I do, however, on a more serious note, pay attention to depression. And of course, here we're not talking about that, that kind of low feeling we feel on occasion. but really that medical diagnosis, those when those feelings are more long term about anxiety or apathy or exhaustion, that really have led to a longer impact on your life and are impacting your emotional, your physical well-being. The demands on you as a caregiver can be difficult and stressful. So if you are starting to worry about your well-being and your loved ones are also worrying, if you're experiencing signs of depression, then please do talk to a healthcare professional. Often depression can be managed with talk therapy or medication. You should not have to live with feelings of hopelessness or helplessness. So I think that's all I'll say about that. But I did want to not negate the fact that for some people, um, this relaxation is not the right tactic for you. Next one. um, so we've been talking about, this is our fifth uh, issue that we're talking about. Again, we talked about the complexity of care. We talked about physical aspects, stress, emotional well-being, and now we're looking at work, career, work, and finances. Now, this is a topic that um, isn't the focus of our topic today, but I have to bring it up because if you're a care home operator, you are running a business, you have to take care of business. And financial stress is real. If you have financial stress, and I don't think any of us have escaped having that feeling of financial stress, it just wears on you all the time. Um, so it's very real. So keep your finances in check, work and home balance. Don't stop planning for the future. And again, try to get some advice here as well in how to manage what is a very challenging career and one that is not always, well, how can we say this? None of us are Steve Jobs or that Tesla guy. You know, we're not where we have worries, we have concerns, and those impact certainly our well-being. So stay connected with other professions, seek advice, continue learning, but also stay connected with your family, with your friends in person and phone, online, and continue to get advice on that aspect as well. And I imagine that all the care home associations that you belong to and that represent you are also invaluable in terms of giving you guidance here as well. We can have the next one. So I'm going to try to wrap this up with just a few more slides. Um, we've been talking about the fact that there's a growing aging population, not just in Hawaii, but around the world. It truly is a global phenomenon. And it's a wonderful phenomenon. It means that we're living longer and so much potential for the world. And yet it also brings its own challenges as well. We know we need to promote healthy aging. It just makes sense, doesn't it, to do everything we can to keep people healthy for as long as we can. But we also have to care for those who can't care for themselves. A friend of mine who's just retired after a very successful career. After 1 year, he had a massive stroke. It's really very sad. And now he can't care for himself. And we all know stories like this, that it wasn't anything he did or it just happened. And it's a very sad thing. And it really means that we have an increasing need for and an increasing need to respect all of our caregivers, whether they're paid or whether they're unpaid or whether they're underpaid. Next slide. I wanted to say maybe just one more thing. I know you've heard about research-based practice, evidence-based practice, and nobody would deny that that's important. Of course, none of us would want to go to our doctor and have our doctor say, here, take this medicine. I have no idea if it works, but go ahead and take it. No, we know we believe in evidence. We want evidence. But there's also something that I think is not given enough attention, and that is practice-based research. In other words, your knowledge. You know a great deal about working with frail elders. Your knowledge should be informing policymaking at the state and national levels on issues around long-term care, Medicaid reimbursements, the adequacy of Social Security or SSI. And again, these are just some examples. But think about your experience. and how very often that's not reflected in policies. You should be advising on administration and program development. What should housing look like? What about what kind of programs work best? How do you advocate? How do you do the right thing? And in turn, I'd like to think that if we listen more to those who are providing care on a 24/7 basis, we will truly build a new knowledge base and research that is not only research-based practice, but practice-based research. Next slide. But, above all, I think we have to think about how important compassion is. There's a saying, and I regret not writing down who said this, but I think about this a lot. And the saying is this: be kind to the young, the sick, and the aged, because at one time in your life, you will be all three of these. So that's really true, isn't it? When you really think about it, at different times in our life, we will be all three of these. There's something else too. I know that we pay a great deal of time to technology, and a lot of technology is great. But with technology and with now artificial intelligence, AI, playing more of a role in elder care, I think that humanity and compassion have never been more important. Nothing can take the place of a kind touch, a caring hug, someone who lets you know they're listening and they care for you. No technology and no AI can do that. So I think there's never been a more important role for compassion. Next slide. So truly the last thing I'll say is I hope that you'll be kind to yourself. You have a difficult job, but you're compassionate. You're not alone. There is help. Remember to ask for it. I have here a website that I hope that can be helpful to you. I hope that what this talk has done, or it's my hope that it acknowledges all the work that you do, because I think you're important. And I hope it also maybe serves as a prompt to yourself that a lot of this, all of it. It's just a prompt for you to take care of yourself, because you deserve a happy and fulfilled life. All compassionate people do. Last slide. So again, I want to thank you for all that you do. One day, I'd love us to be in the same room together so we can chat a little bit more than we do on a Zoom. And again, I'm not complaining about the Zoom. Thank goodness for Zoom, right? But it's also really nice to talk together. So thank you so much for what you do. I wanted to thank all of the people at the Geriatric Education Center, at the ECHO program, at Queens, for giving me this time and opportunity to spend this hour with you today. So again, I'll sign off, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Oh, you're all wonderful.
There's a comment in the chat that said, I really like your soothing voice. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And I have to agree. I just kept getting more comfortable as I was listening.
Oh, I hope I didn't put anyone to sleep.
No.
Maybe you're more relaxed, though. That's good.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
That's
Thank
right.
you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And send me an email and let me know how all of you relax. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Oh, I see people are starting to log off, but here is our evaluation link for those who are requesting CMEs. and certificates of attendance. For the continuing medical education credits for RNs, those are sent out annually by Queens. So if you did not get your 2023, you can reach out to the office and they can send you your report, but they send them out in about mid-January of each year. For those who are requesting a certificate of attendance, such as CNAs, you'll get those after you complete your evaluation. We require one evaluation per attendee to get your certificates. We're also going to be asking about mobility. So we're going to ask you how many residents you have total and how many of your residents feel unsteady when they're standing or walking, how many of them are worried about falling, and how many of your residents have fallen in the past year. These are metrics that these are questions that we ask for a grant that we get it's part of the requirements of the grant and allow us to run this echo session free of cost. So we appreciate you guys participating in these evaluations every month. And you can reach out to John if you're having any problems with certificates of attendance. Again, before you submit your evaluation, triple check the spelling of your name and your email address. The certificate of attendance is going to show up exactly how you spell your name. And if you misspell your email address, it won't arrive in your inbox either. So thank you everybody for your attendance today and for joining Dr. Browne. It was really nice to hear from her. She's currently retired, but she has so much knowledge to share with everybody, and that was kind. It's good to hear from her. And thank you.
Thanks, Michaela.